Today we're going to make a nap mat cover to fit a 2x24x48 nap mat. I already washed my cotton fabric. I went ahead and when I bought it, I bought 1 2/3 yards of this cotton fabric. And what we're going to do after you wash it is we're going to refold it like you would have when you bought it off the bolt. So I'm matching my selvage edges to each other. And the key is when you do this, make sure that that it's folded straight. You can see some fabric when you wash it, it gets a little wonky. If I fold it, I'm just going to do it wrong to show you what it might look like. If you match up these corners, it doesn't always work. So go ahead and fold the side seams this way and then see what happens on this folded edge here. If it doesn't lay and it wrinkles, I don't know if you can see that super great, but if it's wrinkly down here and it doesn't fold even, then you need to adjust it so that it is nice and flat with no wrinkles anywhere on the fabric. So we're going to try it this way. My fabric is, you can see this fold here, there's no wrinkles to it, it's folded nice and crisp. And then my edges on this end here are in alignment, so I'm going to have a nice 90-degree cut. So I'm going to go ahead and do that against the whole length of my fabric. And then we're going to first cut the length of the nap mat cover. So I'm just going to make sure that this is also nice and even without any ripples on it. Okay, so when I cut, I use a rotary mat and cutter. It just gives me nice even cuts and it's nice and straight. And when I cut the length of this, I actually like to fold it again in half, kind of that long way. It just makes it easier for my cutting. So I'm going to go ahead and fold it again. So now I just have one long strip of fabric that is folded. There's technically 4 layers in it because I have that edge, and this is folded again. So 4 layers of that fabric. Again, my fabric is nice and even. There's no ripples or wrinkles or divots in it at all. It's nice and smooth. If you need to iron it before you do this stuff, that would be fine. So to clean up my first edge here, you can see when I washed it, it got a little bit ravelly. I'm going to go ahead and just cut that off. I'm going to use my ruler and my rotary cutter. And the full length that we're going to need to cut this is 54 inches. That'll give us a little bit of room at the foot of the mat. So I'm going to go ahead and you can see my cutting mat is only 36 inches. So I'll show you how I do that. So I just go ahead and put this against the beginning of my ruler. I put my thumb at that 30-inch mark and I pinch the fabric there and I just slide it over and put that at the beginning of the ruler. So 30, and I need it to be 54. So if I go 30 plus 10 is 40, plus another 10 is 50 inches, and I need 4 more inches. So I'm going to cut it right here. Some fabric shrinks, and so that's why I had you buy a little bit more, just in case your fabric shrunk a lot. I'd hate for you to end up not having that full 54 inches. So go ahead and cut that strip off. So we have our fabric 54 inches long. Now we're going to cut the width. So go ahead and unfold your fabric, and then we're going to fold it the opposite way. So go ahead and open that up completely. And now we're going to match up our freshly cut ends. So we're going to have it go this way. I have my one selvage edge on this end, and then I'm going to repeat it on this way. And again, I'm making sure that when I fold this, that it's nice and even and that there's no ripples on that folded edge. So if I go like this and I flatten, smooth my fabric out, it lines up nicely. Okay, so I have it folded now in half one time. Just like the previous step, we're going to fold it again so that we have a strip of our fabric. Again, nice and in alignment. If you don't take the time to straighten things up on this step, your nap mat's not going to be squared and it's going to not look very nice when you're finished. So it's very important to square everything off when you're doing the cutting part here. So now I always like to cut off the selvage edge. That tends to shrink more than the rest of the fabric. So go ahead and just cut off that first selvage edge. You don't have to worry about getting conserving too much because we're not going to use this whole width of this fabric. So I have that cut. I must have a little skip on my blade. Okay, so we're going to keep that at the 0 part of the ruler. I need this part to be 28 inches wide. So go ahead and cut at that 28-inch mark. And this stuff here that comes off on the right hand side, this is extra waste. Rather than wasting it, sometimes it's nice to make a pillowcase. I'll work on getting a pillowcase tutorial for you to later on, to you can make a coordinating pillowcase to go with your nap mat cover. So this piece is ready for the next step, and I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to cut my minky right away. So the minky, you'll want to go ahead and buy, I'd say about 1/7 of a yard for this. Minky, a lot of times it's harder for them to cut because it's so wider and it's slippery on itself. You can see here now, I cut it and it's a little wonky here, and when it's folded in half, it's all rippled here. I want to get those off, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of refold this so that it's more even. Again, I want my fabric to be nice and squared. So now you can see my folded edge here lays nice and flat. My selvage edges over here are nice and in alignment with themselves. So I have that folded the way I want it. Again, I'm going to fold it again so that when I cut it, it's just a little bit easier. I'm matching up my selvage ends with that folded edge. My fabric lays nice and flat. You can see from when I bought it, these edges aren't super much in alignment, so I'm going to go ahead and just clean that up by putting it against that 0 mark on my ruler and just cutting it so that they're all the exact same ending point here. And so just like our previous fabric, I need this to be 28 inches wide. So we're going to go ahead and just leave that there, go over to that 28-inch mark over here, and cut it. All right, so if you haven't ever sewn with minky before, it can sometimes be a pain in the butt. And what I have found that works best with making nap mat covers, I'm actually not going to cut the length of this to that 54 inches now. I'm just going to wait. I'll show you the process of that next. But next we're going to get ready for that sewing, but first we need to put a hem in this material here. So we'll do that next. All right, so now we'll work on that hemmed edge of our cotton print. If you wanted to do cotton on both sides, you would just cut these two of the identical sizes here, but on the bottom hem, you're going to pick one of the short sides. So this is that 28-inch edge. If you have a directional print like I do, at Mario and Luigi, you're going to do the foot of the nap mat cover. So take the bottom edge of the print and we're going to make a hem in that. So to do that, go ahead and take your iron, and I have my right side of the fabric facing down. Wrong side of the fabric is pointing up. Use your iron, and we're going to fold the bottom edge of this fabric upwards towards me by about 1/4 of an inch or so, and do that against the whole length of that 28-inch side, which doesn't take very long. So I'm doing 1/4 of an inch. Mine might be just a smidge more. I give you some wiggle room so it doesn't have to be super precise. You don't need to get your ruler out or anything like that. Once you have that first fold pressed with your iron, next we're going to fold it over again. This will encase that raw edge completely. And this time I do it maybe more like a 1/2 or maybe even a 3/4 inch fold this way. And we'll press that the length of the bottom edge. I usually just iron it. If you want to throw a few pins in there, you can, but I find that iron just kind of holds it in place enough, and I'm going to sew it right away, so I'm not worried about it coming undone. All right, so once you have the whole length of this bottom edge ironed and pressed, you can take it over to your sewing machine, and you're going to go ahead and sew against this folded edge here, just by maybe a scant 1/4 inch from that edge, just to hold that hem down. So we'll go do that next. All right, so you can see that I have that sewn down, so that raw edge is completely encased in that hem, so we don't have to worry about that. Next, we're going to make a hem in our minky. And with the minky, you can see I'm getting little lints coming all over my cutting board mat. It's a pain in the butt to sew with, but man, is it soft and worth it. What I want you to do is go ahead, the bottom edge, it doesn't matter which end it is, the one that has the selvage on it, just pick one of them, it doesn't matter which one. That part doesn't lint at all. So I choose to do that end as my lower hem, and rather than having to fold it over 2 times like I did with the cotton, since this doesn't fray or lint, I just fold it over 1 time. And I kind of try to match up how much that fold is so that it sews a little nicer. So I just kind of fold over by about that much and go ahead and pin that down. Do not use your iron on the minky. If you do, you're going to push flat all of those little bumps, and then you won't have dimpled minky anymore. It'll just be flat. So just go ahead and do that whole length of this bottom edge, putting pins in every several inches or so. Almost done here. And then once I'm done with this here, we'll take this over to the sewing machine and again just sew that edge down like we did in the cotton print, keeping it about I'd say a scant 1/4 inch from this edge of the fold right there. So we'll go ahead and sew that down next. All right, so I have that now sewn in place. Next step is we're going to sew this together, and I prefer to use a French seam on these just because of the edges of the minky do tend to flake off and make a mess. So we're going to encase that hole. If you've never done a French seam before, just pay attention carefully on how I have my fabric kind of laid out. We're going to start by putting our minky right side facing down. So the wrong side of the fabric is facing up now towards the camera. If I wasn't recording, I would just lay this against the length of my entire table, just completely nice and flat. But since I'm showing you this video, we're going to do it in sections. Make sure you can see what I'm working at. So this is the hemmed edge, and you can see this is laid nice and flat. I'm going to then take my cotton print, find that lower hemmed edge, and I'm going to now put this, we're doing wrong sides of the fabric facing each other first step. I know it sounds backward, but that's part of the French seam. So right side of this is facing up. This is the wrong side, this is the wrong side, right side of the minky's facing down. Go ahead and line up those bottom hemmed edges and just kind of line up this edge of this cotton to the edge of that minky right there. And I just kind of make sure that they are nice and flat. I'm not stretching the minky at all. I'm just laying it nice and flat and getting this in alignment. And now I'll go ahead and pin these edges together. I'm gonna move my cotton print just over a smidge. Okay, if there's a little bit of the minky showing in some parts, that's okay. There's a little bit of wiggle room to monkey around with, so I'm not gonna worry about that too much. But go ahead then and pin this in place. I pin maybe every 3 to 4 inches or so. The biggest thing with a minky is you don't want to pull it or stretch it too much, otherwise it's gonna lay funny in this cotton. And you can see right now it's laying nice and flat on both sides, and that's how I'm gonna want it to be when it's finished. So the key is to, before you sew it, make sure that it's laying flat. If you're pinning this together on your lap or not when it's laid flat, it's gonna bunch and stretch, and it's gonna be a little wonky when you sew it. So I'm gonna move this down to that next section, and I'm gonna lay my minky flat. You can see that's nice and even. I'm gonna put my cotton over it and get the edges in alignment. Okay, now we'll pin this next section. As you remember, we did not cut the top, we did not cut the length of the minky. So when I come to the end here, there's going to be quite a bit of the extra minky that is extending past my cotton print. We're going to do that edge last, just so that I know that I'm at the right length that I'm going to need it to be to match this cotton print. So I'm just finishing up pinning this one side here. And then the next step is going to be to do the alternate or the other side long edge. Okay, so I have that entirety done. Now we're going to go ahead and move to this side over here. And again, we're going to do it starting at that lower hemmed edge. I always like to start, if I'm starting the bottom pinning, I'm going to start on the bottom on both sides pinning so that it lays nice and evenly. Okay, so that's matched up to there, and we'll start pinning that down. When we get to sewing this, since it is a French seam, we're going to do a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance around this whole perimeter of the mat cover. And then what we end up doing is we'll then flip that inside out or right side out, or it's backwards when you're doing a French seam. We're going to flip flip it the other way, and then we're going to prepare our edges and sew it again when the wrong sides of the fabric are, how would that be? Again, French seam, it makes everything backwards. I'll explain it better when we get to that step. As you can see, I'm just scooching my fabric over. I'm laying my minky nice and flat. I'm not stretching it, I'm just laying it down, matching up my cotton print, and continue then to pin. Almost done. I think most people get into mistakes when they try to stretch or pull that minky, or they don't pin it when they're using it on a flat surface. It tends to roll and bunch and just not turn out so good. So it's good to do it the way it's intended. Okay, so now you can see at the head of the net cover, we do have quite a bit of that red minky extending past there. What I have found works best, again, my fabric is laying nice and evenly here. So I'm just going to take my ruler and my rotary cutter, and I'm going to match it up to that top edge of my fabric and just cut it at this point now. Now it's the exact same length as my cotton, and I don't have to worry about matching edges and making sure I cut it exactly, because the thing is, the minky stretches and the cotton doesn't, and so sewing those together can sometimes be frustrating. So this is what I have found works the best when you're making these net covers. I don't move this at all right now. I'm just going to pin it as is because it's lined up perfectly because we just cut it that way. So pin this top edge. Again, it shouldn't take too long because it's not that wide of a cover. Now that we have this pinned, go ahead and you're going to sew these three edges. This, the long edge, the top edge, and then this other long edge using a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. We'll go do that now. So now you can see we have the whole perimeter sewn with our right sides facing out. Next step is going to be to turn this inside out, which is actually what it is too. Inside, the wrong side of the fabric is facing outwards. Our raw seam that we just sewn is on the inside of this. Go ahead and push out those corners so that they point nicely. And then this is that last part of that French seam. What we're going to do next is we're going to pin around the seam so that the folded edge is flush against the edge of the fold that we're going to create. So you can kind of see here how I have the folded edge right on the edge. And I'm going to go ahead and place my pin right here to keep that folded edge on the edge. So then when we do the whole perimeter and we sew, we're going to do about a between a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, I'd say about a 1/2 inch seam allowance from that edge. What that'll do is it'll encase that raw edge all the way around so that when we flip it right side out again, you're going to have just a normal seam, and that raw edge is going to be hidden in there. It's not going to fray. It's going to hold up and be a whole lot more durable for you. So you can watch me. I'll speed up the camera here after a little bit, but how I kind of adjust and manipulate the fabric to get that fold on the edge, and then pin it all the way around. This is probably the longest step of this whole project, which truly isn't even all that long. It just takes a little bit of patience, and the more you do this with the folding of the fabric so that the fold's on the edge, the easier it gets. So just kind of work with it as best as you can and pin all the way around. I'll do another close-up here before I speed up the speed of the camera. You can see the folded edge is on the edge. So I'll go all the way around. So I have it pinned now all the way around. Next step is going to be to go ahead and sew that perimeter. I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So go ahead and begin sewing now. So now I have the perimeter of that sewn around completely with the bottom hemmed edges left open. Go ahead and turn this now right side out, and go ahead and point those two corners here at the top just so that they point out nicely. And if you wanted to, you could certainly put a strip of Velcro onto the bottom of this foot of the mat cover so that when the nap mat gets put in there, it secures it a little bit more. That's a personal preference. You certainly don't have to do that if you don't want to. But that's it. That's kind of a custom size, almost like a pillowcase style type of nap mat cover for your little one's school or daycare. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like or subscribe to my channel. Thank you.